8 hours.
Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Bilgecast Horseman. I'm Ollie Johnson, here with Sam Murakaki Fit Congrave and Seb Hirosknight Gran as usual, and we've got Lindsay Broadwell joining us this week and hopefully for future ones if she wants to. Hey, how you doing?
Hello, I'm doing alright. I've got an Easter egg, so my life is
Wish I had one of those. I'll ask whoever goes shopping next to get one cheaper on Tuesday.
We only had like 3 eggs, but Liz insists on celebrating Easter, the way God intended.
Yeah.
What with eggs?
Apparently,
You're apparently associated with rabbits.
Well, no, but why not?
Right.
Personally, I
can't tell if that was rustling or static, but either
I made a
way.
mistake. Yeah, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
I ordered mine online, but I did the whole Spinal Tap thing where I got the Imperial and Metric mixed up, so I ended up with a really tiny egg.
Right.
Well, I thought it was going to be bigger, and it ended up being tiny.
Yeah. Okay, so, right. Okay, so BoJack Horseman, season 3 this time. What do we think? Do we think things? Let's find out. Right. Yeah,
I like season 3.
General.
Done.
I think season 3 was the point where the show was moving a wardrobe or something.
In a way, I think season 3 is kind of the calm before the storm of season 4.
3, I think.
Wait a minute. You consider season 3 a calm?
I'd say it's considering what happens in season 4 that we are not obviously going to discuss.
But consider what happens in season 3,
I think,
Sarah Lynn and all that.
Alright,
Yeah.
I think season 3 could be justifiably described as the downturn in BoJack's life. The turning point, if you will.
Also, gives us some of the best advice from Cuddly Whiskers that BoJack really needed. And also, where Diane actually quotes what we've been saying for 2 episodes.
Yeah.
That they bring out word for each other because they're too similar. They say it word for word.
Okay. Hold on.
We also get... sorry.
Shall we just go right to talking about the thing I know we all want to talk about at least a bit? What I've come to see as the tragedy of BoJack Horseman, Sarah Lynn.
Sarah Lynn tragedy.
And the tragedy's just turned up to 11 when...
It involves the drug. It involves the drug that's shown early in BoJack. The whole BoJack kills thing.
I just love how this show sets things up and then it pays off later on.
I like that BoJack doesn't understand that horse is slang for cocaine, for the drug, for that drug.
heroin. Yeah,
he doesn't understand that. While also throwing Goober in there.
Go home, Goober.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Sarah Lynn situation.
it really came back to bite him in the ass later.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about that. But yeah, like when you were saying that it's a calm before the storm, I don't really agree that it's a calm, but it is kind of the warm water that the hurricane forms on, which then destroys the entire city later.
I mean, taking apart the Sarah Lynn situation and taking the rest of the season as it is, I consider it the calm before the storm, mainly because of all the crazy shit Mr. Peanut Butter does next season. Because what everything else that happens in this season is kind of just there, but then everything in season 4 just goes completely ape shit, mainly for Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter, who's, well, Diane's interesting this season, and she does do my favorite thing this season of her just picking up her phone to look up her rights to piss off of Meow Meow Fuzzy Face.
I do love Meow Meow Fuzzy Face.
Damn it, you were looking up your rights. I love Meow Meow Pussy Face.
So he's the best.
He is the only good cop.
He's going to be them wasting police time discussing whether or not he's he's a loose cannon and going completely over everything he does.
Now,
We get Todd's thing, but let's go on with the Sarah Lynn thing because that's it's uncomfortable not just Sarah Lynn, but it's everything they do while they're on the the situation.
Sarah Lynn.
Yeah, and it's almost like we as the audience have been normalised to it in a way.
Is well, I'm sure that was intentional, but when I said that Sarah Lynn is the great tragedy of BoJack Horseman,
and do you know the bit which gives me kind of nightmares? Sarah Lynn's the tragedy, but it's like there is an awful lot of tragedy in the show. Because when they go on that bender, they turn up to Penny's university, and the thing is, it's like it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting that it's interesting that it sticks out to me because it's just like Sarah Lynn expressly said like she looked like she was doing fine until she saw her, and I was just like congrats BoJack, you probably just caused her to realize just how fucked up that whole situation was and store up a whole lot of mess for the future.
I mean, considering right before that they re-injured Diane's arm. You think that's bad. They break into someone's house and break their arm, which, funnily enough, Mr. Peanut Butter and Diana kind of chill about because they kind of expect this shit from BoJack at this point.
Oh, later on, Diane does bring it up again.
Yeah. What was I going to say? I called Sarah Lynn the tragedy of BoJack Horseman, but I'm not just talking about her death. I think the entire character was profoundly tragic.
Oh yeah.
Oh god.
You mentioned before because she was a child actor, which we all hear the stories about how fucked up they can end up becoming. I mean, look at Macaulay Culkin for an example, but she was exposed to alcohol and basically very bad parental figures in general, considering how her mother treated her.
Oh yeah, well.
And let's not forget her stepdad, who's a photographer.
It is never expressly stated, but I think we can infer from the context we get that.
I mean, the whole reason it's never expressly stated is that real life Hollywood is very, very adamant that they don't have a massive problem with pedophiles when, it's frankly an open secret at this point that they do. But, saying that outright is the sort of thing which gets, which gets shows cancelled, which,
It's not helpful.
They needed to
that, her mother flat out says she did something in order to even get Sarah Lynn.
And that was the thing, she didn't want it. She never wanted any of it.
Yeah. She wanted to be an architect.
I like that her architecture knowledge does come up a few times.
She doesn't want to be this person who's an actress or a singer. She just wants to be the person that builds brilliant buildings.
And that's the most tragic thing, is that
I'm sorry, but
this isn't even the life she wanted, and she doesn't know how to get out of it. Because it's all she's ever known.
It's worse. It's when they end up in that motel and they mention about because BoJack's built on getting that Oscar, and then she just when you look at it, Sarah Lynn's had more commercial success than BoJack had after horsing around, and she flat out tells him that it doesn't do anything for her. I mean, he's told this multiple times. He's told it from Cuddly Whiskers, who's a bit more. He's more in control of his life, and he's like. It didn't fill my void, but I'm happy. He's found a way to be happy. Sarah Lynn's in a situation where she's gotten all that. She's had the Oscar, but said it doesn't do anything. She's not happy, and she's not in a position she wants to be in. So,
we have a commenter. Landon GMD says hi. Hi, Landon GMD. How you doing?
Hello, Landon.
That's the thing. It's reaffirming to BoJack from a different perspective that this Oscar is again. Much like how he's been told with everything he's going to do, it's not going to fix anything. The novel didn't make him happy. Doing Secretariat didn't make him happy. The Oscar isn't going to make him happy. His mother even told him in the last season that you can fill your life with these things, but it's not going to change. It's not going to fill a void. It's not going to make you happy.
There's one parallel.
I mean, it's interesting that it comes from her all people when when we dive into BoJack's childhood and realize what an absolute monster she was. And the thing is, it's like she says that this will never make you happy because BoJack's whole deal is just trying to feel like he's worth something because his entire childhood he didn't. So he keeps throwing himself into things. But the thing is, his entire arc is he just alienates and drives away everyone around him because he was raised in a very toxic environment and never found a way to work through that in a healthy way, which other people did. You look at Diane, who's the main counterpoint to him. She also had a shitty childhood, but she gets better because she's willing to acknowledge and work on her faults in a way that BoJack just isn't.
Maggie's here. Hey,
I
Maggie,
mean, all
how you
these
doing?
characters have different.
And Landon says, I'm doing excellent. Happy Easter. Happy Easter, Landon.
Easter. But BoJack was also never loved by his parents. In fact, he was treated as a full-on burden from the second he was born.
That's what I said. He always tried to prove he was worth something.
And the way
that's where his whole complex comes from.
The later seasons make me feel a bit more for Beatrice because she's more a victim of her own environment. And to be fair, watching what happened to her mother,
that's only an excuse for so long.
The whole thing is, it's like I actually have like a piece to say about this, about people being sympathetic towards Beatrice because she was raised in such a bad way. It's like she was. My own mother had a really shitty childhood, but that doesn't justify her taking it out on me. And likewise, Beatrice's abuse of BoJack doesn't justify the things he does.
I'm not saying I'm not saying that it justifies anything she does. She
gives
does.
Context.
It gives. Yeah.
I mean, the way I've always liked to phrase it is she is a tragic figure, but she is not a sympathetic one.
Maggie says, I haven't seen BoJack Horseman yet, but hearing this group of people discuss anything is a must-listen for me. Honestly, Landon says, same here. Honestly, Ollie and Lindsay could be talking about rock walls and I'd tune in. Well, do we have much to say about rock walls? Seb says that's coming next week.
Do we have much to say about rock walls? Yeah, I mean, the way the ink is put together was very sturdy indeed. So, hey.
Well, to finish my point, I feel sympathy for what happened to her, but at the same time, the way she behaved after she got out of that environment, it doesn't justify how she treated BoJack just because of everything that happened to her, and also because she regretted her choices because she basically got duped by Butterscotch. And the way she deals with Butterscotch is not healthy, but the way BoJack did not deserve any of the way that either of his parents treated him. So there is no justification because I've always been raised with the belief that even if you have shitty parents or they came from a shitty environment and they treat you like shit, that's no excuse to act like it. That's no excuse to act like them because you've already suffered. You've already suffered under it. And I'm saying this as someone who has a daughter and came from a family where where my grandparents didn't have a great upbringing. My parents definitely didn't have a great upbringing, and I really don't want to do any of the stuff that I had to live through on my children because I didn't think it was fair enough.
Absolutely.
Same,
I like how
neither BoJack nor Beatrice have any, there's no justification for why they do anything. I mean, Todd does his little that one speech this season, I think to you can't just keep doing shitty things to people and then say sorry about it. And then telling him he's not. Look, it's not his parents.
The actual quote is,
"It's not
you
anything."
can't keep doing shitty things and then feel bad about yourself like that makes it okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Sorry, it's been a few days. I tried to recap on it last week because I thought we were going to do it, and it's been a little while.
Hold on, we have comments. Maggie says, question, is the show good from the off, or does it take a while to get going? I like it from the off, but it definitely does get better.
Oh, the show is not good from the off. The show is honestly not good from the off.
But it's not everything it could be from the start.
I think I said it.
I mean, the usual advice I give people who are getting to the show is to start with the episode where BoJack has the confrontation with Herb, and then watch the first few episodes and go from there. Because otherwise, if you're just trying to get through the first 7 episodes where it's just kind of like Family Guy, but not as funny, that's often a real hard sell for a lot of people. So I always tell people, watch the episode with Herb and then treat the episodes before it as a flashback and then continue the show chronologically. Because otherwise, it's just really hard for people to get into.
I always treated season 1 as the prologue and treated season 2 as the
Season
actual
1
start.
is definitely very
Really?
rough around the
To me.
edges.
Interesting.
But season 1 really has a lot of world building to do, but there's so much from so many different time periods for BoJack.
What we need to understand about season 1 is the show was just starting at this point. I think they weren't taking enough risks at that point because they weren't sure that people would buy into what it is immediately without being eased into it. And I think if they knew what they knew now, then season 1 probably would have took a lot more risks and established a lot of things earlier and a lot of themes of the show earlier.
Also, Mr. Peanut Butter being sad.
Yeah, sad dog.
That was sad. Yeah, sad dog this season, and his whole he got over it he got over it. I did like his whole coffee thing when he's depressed when he finally comes back.
Maggie says Skype did a chat time with my girlfriend, but I'm definitely going to start watching BoJack later. Have a good day, everyone. See you, Maggie. Have a good one.
You too, Mike.
6 seasons. There's a lot to get through.
Let's see.
But yeah,
and Seb has been fielding comments in my absence. I agree with basically everything he says.
I like how I've become your PR spokesman.
That's a terrifying thought.
I'm gonna make you.
Right. So yeah. Season 1 very rough around the edges. Season 2 is when it starts getting legitimately good.
Season 3.
I think season 3 sets the tone for the rest of the show.
Well, it does. It also sets up, I think, to lighten the mood a little. It's the start of one of Todd's other major things. His major things where he starts succeeding despite himself. I mean, I know last season,
upwards.
Well, we had the Disneyland. We had the Disneyland last season, which I still think is friggin' hilarious how he got that. But this one's the whole thing where he gets that girl who likes him, but he's discovering his asexuality. But then he starts making business. He starts his trend of making businesses, unintentionally making them successes, and then selling them off to make money.
Oh yeah, I liked the whole thing with the
Abracadabra.
That was a good one.
Also, paper
the paper mache Todd head.
Yeah, paper mache. Was that this season?
Yes, paper mache head Todd that gets taken away by character.
No, Seb, it's character actress Margot Martindale. That is a name to this show.
Yeah, it is. You're absolutely right, Ollie. You're absolutely right.
I love how BoJack can create a lexicon among fans. Like someone could just say spaghetti strainers, and you'd know what they were talking about.
Oh god. Yeah. Liz was very unhappy with that scene, by the way. She felt really bad for the meerkat as he's finally home with his kid, and then
this is going to be great, as it always is, from my perspective.
But no, it's not that he comes in and asks him. He literally just gets out of his car, starts selling it, and then grabs him and forces him. The guy, he essentially kicked.
You never told me what your favourite, I forget the artist name song was. It's Cats in the Cradle, but don't listen to it now, it's too relevant.
or when they're trying to sell things because Todd's not there and he's just like, does Todd things and Mr. Peanut Butter just does it anyway.
I can't remember what it was. I remember when he came up with some sort of stupid Todd idea and then Mr. Peanut Butter thought it was genius.
Yeah, that's when he goes, well, if Todd was here, he'd probably say something about spaghetti strainers. And then you'd say, I think that's been done. But then he'd say something like, what about Spaghetti Strainers, the TV show? I love it. I'm pouring all my money into it. And the guys all...
dumb ideas when they create a whole show around the premise of Birthday Dad, which was just a card. I just love how small, inconsequential things take on life of their own. Both in a tragic way. It's like the whole Pete repeat thing, and you've also got, minor sort of joke things like Hollywood that stick for the whole show. And...
Also, the way that the songs on the radio always seem to reference what time it is. what year it is.
Generic 90s grunge song.
Oh.
The radio, except for the alarm clocks that are a bit too specific. Welcome to 2 months later.
2 months later. Sorry, I was having a stroke.
Oh, is this the season where we are introduced to Judah? Or was...
Yes, I think...
I love Judah.
Yeah, first episode of season 3, I love Judah. How
Judah's
can you
great.
not? It's brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
Great.
Send the Tsar my regards, Rasputin.
I will leave a message.
Judah strikes me as the kind of person you really cannot insult because he will just take it.
Just all the time, you know. He doesn't get offended or bothered by me.
He's the perfect secretary or assistant because he just cannot be offended by anything you do.
This is also
and he just makes
the
it so
season where I
funny.
grew to be a lot more sympathetic to and like quite a bit more Princess Carolyn.
Yeah.
Princess Carolyn is, I said from the beginning, the most complex character out of every single person in this entire show, and goes through a lot, quite a lot.
She
of
is very
arc.
much what the Hollywood business has made her, but and that's the part I don't really like so much. The whole, you know, the schmoozing agent kind of thing.
She is, you know, and I think that's what makes her interesting as a character. You know, that's an aspect of who she is, but she's got other aspects, like, you know, when she sympathises with her, you know, assistants later and gets Judah to help them. And
like, but this is the one, like the episode I really felt for her was the one where we see the future, that she makes up of her.
Oh, I love.
Yeah, the future for the door for her.
It makes me feel better.
Of her descendant Ruthie.
Even that has.
Of her descendant Ruthie, which is what she names her eventual adopted child, by the way, and
I recognise that as soon as I
had to
heard it.
rewatch
I was like,
the series and get to this episode, and
to be fair, the thing that makes me feel better for Princess Carolyn is, for some reason, Judah makes me feel like she's got a safety net, because it feels like he knows more than she does, or he's more aware of everything around her. So, because originally it's more competitive for her because she's got to deal with Vanessa Gecko and Rutabaga.
I think that Judah understands her than any other character on the show.
It's not just that. Judah as a character, especially later, he's able to figure out the best course of action before anyone else can.
Yeah.
Even before she's even thought of it, so he's already made plans within plans and everything and arranged everything. And he's even able to think of solutions faster than Princess Carolyn can.
Yeah.
So it works as a safety net for her, because I was glad that she was finally out of that office that she was in. Also, can we just talk about Marv, please? I've been dying for 2 seasons to get mad at Marv's existence. Marv, don't you remember Marv, BoJack's former agent?
Oh yeah. Marv.
Oh yeah. You know, do I really need to mention the guy who goes around telling Princess Carolyn to go around buying underwear for women that he hasn't even made eye contact with?
He's terrible and he's hilarious.
I've already explained before. I feel awkward enough buying clothes for my wife. He's buying erotic negligees for people he's seen at the bus stop. And not only that, he takes credit for Princess Carolyn's work because he makes that comment that BoJack, he's not going to work with BoJack or try and get BoJack work because not even the best agent in all of Hollywood could get him a job, and then she does it, and he takes all
it was Hollywood at the time.
Yeah, and
he got it right.
And then of course he quits, and no tears are lost really when he goes.
We're 20 minutes into a BoJack podcast. We haven't even mentioned BoJack himself, or that much.
That's the thing about his show.
A lot happens. These are around the times in the series when things start to happen around BoJack. I mean, season 4, it's going to be even more. There's going to be even more when BoJack isn't even around.
A common
for
thread in this
episodes.
season is how little control.
Yeah, it's like for all that this show.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's like it's interesting that for all the show gets called the Sad Horse Show, it really does have a very good sense of when to step back and focus on something other than BoJack being kind of a terrible person. Because the whole thing is, well, BoJack is a compelling character and is interesting. You can have too much of one thing. Like if it was just BoJack is miserable and keeps screwing up, it would be indistinguishable from so many other shows. Just like, look, this guy is sad and he justifies the terrible things he does by being sad, which I think honestly the decision to shy away from that is what really elevates the show in my book.
They
focus on the other characters.
They spend the first 2 seasons building up the rest of the characters enough that they could stand on their own. I mean, again, look at Todd. I mean, look what he ends up doing later.
Todd.
Yeah, Todd becomes his own thing where you can do. I mean, let's face it. I'm just going to spoil it. Henry Fondle.
That's
a Todd thing. That's an entire Todd arc. And all that could have been its own episode with Todd, and it would have still worked.
But I've never seen another show that understands its tertiary characters so well and articulates that understanding equally well.
You're right, Ollie. And the good thing about its focus on the secondary and tertiary characters is the whole tragedy about BoJack Horseman isn't so much how he feels and how his actions affect him. It's how it affects the people around him. Usually unintendedly or unintentionally or in indirect ways, but they do, and I like how there's episodes that focus on that. Like later on, you have the episode where you focus on a bunch of characters we haven't seen for a while, like Gina and Kelsey. That was a good episode. I mean, I know I keep talking about later seasons, but it's hard not to look at this show.
I know everything feeds into everything so well that you can't really look at parts in a vacuum.
Also, there's the whole thing of you get to see how other characters react to certain situations, and you can look at it of how BoJack would react to it, but then you see how everyone else deals with it. Like, look at how Mr. Peanut Butter deals with the whole finding out his brother's got, a sickness, he's
Captain Peanut
sick,
Butter,
and how he goes
voiced by Weird Al Yankovic.
He goes into denial.
That's right.
But
he goes into beforehand.
But then he goes into a depressive state and denial.
Yeah.
And he finds his way to get around it. But then that BoJack would deal with something similar in an unhealthy way.
Yeah.
It's nice to see how every other character responds to a situation, and knowing how BoJack would react to it, but then see how everyone else deals with it. I mean, Princess Carolyn always that character that always, no pun intended, lands on her feet.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
we really should get on to BoJack himself, because he has that whole Oscar storyline.
I was about to say a common thread in the story of season 3 is how little control BoJack suddenly has over his own life, and
it wasn't even in the movie, it was just a computer-generated image.
Look how upset he is when they try and tell him to distance himself from horsing around, because he clings to that show like a goddamn safety blanket.
Well, horsing around for BoJack represents a time
big.
Before he was so messed up. In many ways, the last time he was happy.
Yeah.
So look at the whole thing when he tells Princess Carolyn he's still coming down from his last big gig, and they say that was like 11 years ago.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
The BoJack Horseman show story.
Yeah, I was going to mention the BoJack Horseman show, where as soon as they say it'll be bigger than horsing around, he starts to panic. It gets really hostile, especially to Princess Carolyn, which I don't like.
Another thing about BoJack being so nervous about the prospect of further fame, it drives home the fact that while he might have thought he did, I don't think BoJack really wanted the Hollywood lifestyle either.
Yeah, because this is sort of like, if you go back to season 1, he has that whole fantasy sequence where
Beatrice tells him to sing the goddamn lollipop song. Is that the one you're thinking about?
There's not, no. I'm referring to back in season 1 when he has the drug trip and he hallucinates this whole sort of like alternate life he could have had with what's the name of the deer? Charlotte. The whole alternate life he could have had, and then he snaps out of it at the end with her saying, "No, if only you'd chosen this life instead of the one you actually lead," or something to that effect. And I was just like, yeah, that's because I feel like BoJack is a character who knows he's made bad decisions, but has a bad habit of doubling down on them rather than saying, "Hey, it's never too late to mend. I should try to actually better myself," which he only really does in the final season, which we all know how that turned out.
I think, and I said this about Diane in one about the whole season, is the problem with BoJack that is fundamental to this is he doesn't actually know what he wants. He knows what it makes sense for him to want. Like, he thinks he wants an Oscar because that's what it makes sense for one in his position with his life to want. But he doesn't want that.
And I think that's something a lot of people get trapped in, is sort of like other people's expectations.
Well, Jill does that
them, because especially.
I was going to say, Jill does that whole thing where she asks him what he wants, and he keeps saying, and then she just goes, "And then what?" to everything he says.
Well, BoJack always expects these things to make him permanently happy, but they never do, and he doesn't know how to cope with the down after the high.
I win an Oscar, and then.
And I think the other thing is that BoJack sort of fell into other people's expectations of him. Like, even though he knows full well his parents are terrible people, he still has that stupidest part of him, which is trying to please them, which is trying to make them happy, trying to make them proud. Even though he knows that's never going to happen and that Beatrice is a terrible, terrible person, he still, invites her to the tapings of Horsing Around. He still, keeps touch with her, even though she's been nothing but a toxic influence in his life. And, when I look at my own life, it's like I could easily have ended up like that if I hadn't decided that, maybe giving a shit about what people who've never liked me to begin with think. I think it's a trap, honestly. A lot of people
that's why I live hundreds of miles away from certain people.
Yeah, that's why I cut my parents off last year and never want to speak to them.
Well, I was in a situation where I understood that the life where I wasn't, well, with the exception of obviously Ollie.
You basically lived in my house for a year.
Yeah.
At the weekend.
Have I a joke for you?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, real talk. I was pretty much living with Ollie because I could not live in the house I was in. I won't delve into detail. I wasn't. Yeah, but it's if I could have stayed longer, for a fact I would have.
I can vouch for this. I'd go and visit Ollie, and then Sam would be there. I was like, "Oh, hi, Sam."
Yeah, I just could not bear to be home anymore. And then, obviously, I met my partner, who obviously people I live with did not approve of, and still do not approve of her. And then when I finally left, that created an entire load of hell. But I made it clear that I had to get away. I couldn't live in that lifestyle anymore. I couldn't live that life anymore. I needed to be somewhere where I was actually happy and where I could actually be healthy, mentally healthy. Because at this point in time, I'm on a mental health list, waiting for help to deal with a lot of problems that I've finally gotten the nerve to deal with.
Well, at least you're surrounded by people who love you and who you love, and that's important.
Well, that's the thing. And getting to BoJack, he has people who clearly care for him, but look how his treatment of them has, blown them away. I mean, Todd is no longer Todd at one point was basically a constant for him. It's kind of like he felt like Todd would always be there, whether he wanted him to be or not. And then when he finally wants Todd's gone off and done his own thing. Todd's acknowledged, similar to what I did, that the situation with BoJack was not healthy for him.
Well, yeah,
and being away. To be honest, it's a whole when you're away from a situation and you realise sometimes how happy you are out of it.
Yeah.
You really don't want to go back, and that's a similar situation to what I've been in that I was away from this environment I did not want to be around. And being away from it, I was actually happy and felt so much better that going back to it is just probably not best. It was not best for me. And for Todd, he knows that going back to BoJack is not best for him.
Yeah, Well, one of my favourite character relationships in the show is between Toz and BoJack, because, like you say, they start off with this thing where they were living together for a while and it wasn't really healthy for Todd. Then he distanced himself, and then later on he found a way to still be friends with BoJack, even though it meant, not really seeing him that often. And I think that it was good that they found that sort of happy medium by the end of the show.
Absolutely. Todd starts off as the generic stoner roommate that we've seen many, many times.
Hooray!
I'm glad he became so much more. And honestly, Aaron Paul is the perfect person for that role.
Absolutely. What?
Do you know what's funny? When I started watching this, I thought, oh my god, I'm hearing this voice. I can't think of anything other than Jesse Pinkman. And then now when I watch Breaking Bad, I'm like, oh, I can't think of anything other than
I love
Todd.
that.
It's... I like it. He's just become
Where is
Todd,
that Breaking Todd video I keep telling you to make, by the way?
I'm gonna make it. The whole thing where he says, you said it yourself, and then he says, a robot? I was thinking of having it, doing it so that, both, Jesse and Walt build Henry Fondle.
Wanna cook? Hooray! A task!
Yes!
You will submit to my demands.
And then maybe, Tupac says something like he has some sort of altercation with Henry. I'm sure I could just...
I don't know. You could kind of just like infer the entire thing by having like a shot of the RV and Todd's gone off somewhere and Walt's just in there staring at this robot, and the next shot you cast the RV is just bouncing up and down ever so slightly.
Oh yes,
so, show don't tell.
Do it.
That is my favourite position.
Oh. But yeah.
I've got so many.
What else happens in season 3?
Well, we've done the Cuddly Whiskers thing, the Sarah Lynn situation. There's the spaghetti strainers and the skunk. There's one episode. There's one episode we are morally obligated to talk about, though.
Oh, I'm hooked.
Fish out of water.
I love that episode so much.
We are obligated to talk about that.
Just
speaking of show don't tell.
An entire episode that is basically non-verbal.
Well, it shows how good this show is when you can do an episode that's almost entirely non-verbal, and then another episode which is almost completely dialogue, and they're both, two of the best, TV episodes ever made for TV.
I love all the sight gags on this, where he's trying to get the seahorse dad's attention, and every time he looks over, the baby has been obscured by the machinery.
I love that they basically use Austin Powers style storytelling to do that, and it just works.
Also, a thing that I find particularly interesting in this episode is water has often been used as a device in BoJack to illustrate when a character is overwhelmed. But in this episode, and only in this episode, there is a point where BoJack is on the point of not being able to get away and then realises he can swim. And then the water becomes empowering rather than overwhelming.
Yeah, you make what you will of your circumstances, and that's BoJack doing that for the first time, it's sort of, although you don't realise it at the time, shows that there is hope for him. And the difference really between him and Sarah Lynn at this point is Sarah Lynn believes herself to be a lost cause, so doesn't take actions to self-improve. Whereas,
it's sad because you can see how much it's hurting Sarah.
Yeah, and then you look at Diane, who is quite often takes actions to improve herself and her circumstances despite what she's had to live with. And then you've got Bud, who's in the middle, who still makes these terrible mistakes, and then later on, decides to self-improve. And it's sort of interesting that he sees both examples.
Yeah.
I mean, especially when you see how Diana ends up, I think in a sad way, Diane made the best choice.
Yeah. Yes.
Out of everyone, Diane made the best choice.
Yeah. Well, like you say, real world parallels. If she moved away to be with people she loves.
Well, she's had like an entire life without him at this point.
And funny thing is, that didn't harm her relationship with her friends at all, because
everyone else kind of got their own lives going around this time as well. Todd started to get his own thing going with his his aforementioned businesses. Mr. Peanut Butter has always been self-dependent anyway, so he's never really needed to be around BoJack, but he's wanted to. Diane she's intentionally in season 3 even says to him she's trying to distance herself, even when they're on a whale murder mystery, which my wife really did not like the whale stripper thing, although she did like Goober's thing. I know, but she liked Goober's. The only bit she liked was Goober's whole thing. And for people who are saying this is cruel, stop doing that, okay? And the fact that it's pretty much a strip club, but it's a strip club that's a family thing.
I love it that every episode seems to have this really fucked up episode. Like, you've got the chicken farm episode in the last one, and then you've got the whole real world
chicken
farm.
Farm.
You've got the whole
no one knows chicken like chickens.
I want to know.
I love that.
I want to know more about animal classification in this universe, because, like, how is it decided who's food?
Yeah.
Cannibalism is fine if you're lobotomized.
Remember the steak thing where that cow serves that guy the steak and he looks at her awkwardly.
Yeah.
Like, sorry. Mm-hmm.
What sort of background gags? Like, there's the one where that person has sort of like a dead pig's head on a plate.
Is this going to be the whole argument with Goofy? Is this going to be the argument with, Pluto in Disney, which is, Goofy's okay because he's a talking dog, but maybe Pluto's disabled, so they treat him like an animal.
It's really messed up.
It really.
Do Disney characters resort to cannibalism?
I sort of like that in BoJack this just isn't addressed, and we're expected to just accept it, because you do forget that they're animals.
Addressed enough for us to really think this is fucked up.
Yeah.
And that's what
Because you
makes
do
it
forget
great.
that these characters are animals, unless they bring it up.
It's everything and it's nothing at the same time.
Is it funny that my wife expected that one bit when BoJack buys her a box of crinkly paper in my wife expected there to actually be something in the box? That's the joke. And she went, yeah, but I was expecting something like a cat toy in there or something. Went, no, the joke is that cats like crinkly paper.
I like how Mr. Peanut Butter really is a dog, and goes and ways like him being afraid of a male man.
Really hammers that one home.
Yes. Oh, I love just to be on this one.
Drop it.
Was it this season where they had the whole Zach Braff thing?
No, that was that was
the fun rate.
Yeah, that was season 4 when he's running for governor.
Sorry, I'm on season 4 at the moment, and it's hard for me to remember which episodes are in season 3 and which one's in season 4.
Oh.
The thing about the show, it just sort of fades in. I mean, it's weird to think you've watched 4 seasons and, like, in the show, 2 or 3 years have passed, and it feels that way, and it doesn't. It's an amazing show when it comes to the passage of time, because by the end of it, you can believe that several years have passed between these people. But when you're binge watching it, it sort of comes across as well.
It flows very well. What is Diane's arc in this season? I'm drawing a blank.
Well, she becomes a social media sort of person, and I think this is probably the season with the least Diane in, actually. And there's also the beginning of certain cracks with her relationship with Mr. Peanut Butter, because she can't really convey how she feels to him, whereas he's very good at that, and they go to couples therapy for that. And I
Jamaican bobsledders.
No, actually, she had a big arc in this one, because it's the one where she
abortion,
and there was the whole Aquafina, which was great, and how she sort of took a light-hearted thing about it, which seemed insensitive to her, but later on she realised that it spoke to people in a way that a sobering sort of message can't. And, it sort of shows how her method of, exposing things doesn't always work, because you sort of have to grab people's attention in other ways to get the message across.
Like, they actually made the song "Brat Brat Pew Pew." Get that fetus, kill that fetus.
Yeah.
It's on Spotify.
To be honest, that's the song I quote whenever somebody asks me if I want to have kids, and the answer is, I've attended enough childbirths to know that shit is a horror show. No, I think I'm good, to be honest.
Yeah, I've been there when my daughter was born, and although, to be fair, I couldn't stop pissing myself laughing.
I mean, to be honest, there is sort of like some dark comedy to forcing out a thing the size of a melon from a hole the size of time, but hey.
My wife was asking me to cannibalize a nurse. It was hilarious because she was high as all hell.
Mm-hmm. See, the thing is, like, the only birth I've attended...
She asked to kill and eat nurse because she didn't like her name.
Okay. You see, I didn't get
an unlikable name.
See, the whole thing is, like, I didn't get the fun side of it, because the only birth I've attended is from somebody who, frankly, was kind of a bit of a lunatic and demanded, I want a completely natural birth, I want no drugs. It was something like a brief presentation, I think, and it was just 40 hours of screaming.
Yeah,
I never want to do this.
My
wife was drugged up at the time, and when we got in, she was having delusions at the time. She was seeing things, and she didn't understand. She couldn't hear us when we were telling her she had to push, so I had to scream wrestling metaphors until she got it.
Mm.
Basically, I screamed...
the whole thing is, like...
Well, they told her to push.
The brain has a very interesting thing where real horrific trauma, we just don't really remember it. And I'm thinking, yeah, that explains childbirth. That explains why people do it again. They forget how bad it was.
Well, we were saying she had to push. She said, I'm not supposed to push yet. I went, do the one thing they won't do for Daniel Bryan and push it.
You do realise this is going out to people. Is this a conversation that you and your family are comfortable, sort of having aired publicly?
It's fine, to be honest. It's something we've said.
I just thought
the only person who has a problem with it, oddly enough, is my sister, because she's like, no, that's not funny. I went, my wife thinks it's funny. She keeps laughing because the first thing she saw when she was high was peanut butter aliens, and she's allergic to peanut butter, so she was terrified.
I do love the episode Stop the Presses, where BoJack spends the entire episode trying to cancel a newspaper subscription. And he...
I love that episode. It's just a conversation with the
closer.
A woman who's running the newspaper. The closer, who is basically just giving him therapy.
It actually works as good foreshadowing.
I love how BoJack accepts therapy in these early episodes as long as he doesn't realise it's therapy.
Yeah.
It's like the one he thinks that the therapist is just his friend, and he, as soon as he realises, he sort of goes into panic mode.
Yeah. Oh, and Princess Carolyn has the whole thing with starting her own agency. So yeah, this is the season we're introduced to Judah.
Judah.
In the very first scene, if I remember correctly. Because that's when there's laughing that Sam mentioned.
Yeah.
Do you know who we haven't talked about yet who's introduced? Well, at the very end of the last season, but is a main character in this season.
Anna Spanakopita. Yeah.
I thought she was an interesting character, and I liked the whole thing where BoJack, was just really curious about her, and then when he saw her, he just realised, she's just another, person like him, and I thought that whole storyline was quite interesting.
And of course, on the Bender, he goes to her house many times,
and she keeps in the lifeguard story, and he keeps forgetting, which basically sums up how anyone who tries to help him or gives him advice, it just falls on deaf ears at this point. Because he's like, what's this got to do with me? Is everyone still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I mean, I still love the whole thing with Cuddly Whiskers.
Yes.
There's the fact that I love the fact that he's so ignorant that when they mention about the place where he ends up being, and he goes, he went there a while back. He went there before when the show got cancelled. I wonder where he is now, though.
Oh yes. I just love that kind of humour in BoJack.
Yeah. Cuddly Whiskers was interesting. Their whole process on working on the show, when they showed that all-nighter they pulled up when they were just spitballing ideas. I like that scene.
Yeah, because when you're on a creative role and you're writing something with someone else, that is what it's like. You just come up with all these daft ideas and just chuck it in, and the next day you realise that half of it's garbage.
Oh god, yeah. To be honest, their session made me think of something new. It made me think of how you. Yeah, to be honest, that made me think of what you and Peter like writing.
Yeah, we are a bit of a force when we get going, aren't we?
No, I mean, like, you come up with absolutely terrible, awful ideas, and then just think, well, I'll put them in now. But, what if the character of Jeffrey is suddenly high on cocaine? Oh, yeah, that's edgy.
Was that in an episode?
No, though I'm glad it wasn't.
I was going to say, I don't remember writing that.
No, I just kind of imagine whenever you're writing, that's how you do it. Like you and them just throw shit at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah, the cannabis farming, MPs, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and then BoJack, of course, as soon as Princess Carolyn says that she liked the horse from horsing around, everybody liked it. And then he tries to stop it right after an episode where they've said that no one liked that show. It was shit.
Well, I think it have a positive impact on some people, so maybe BoJack isn't completely wrong to have a rose-tinted...
The thing is, it's subjective, and yes, it's some people might not have liked the show or may look back on it with, rose-tinted glasses.
If it had a positive impact on a few people, then, it's done some good. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a bit... It all reminds me of that episode of The Simpsons where Lisa designs that doll and it does badly, but that one girl likes it, And
also, Bradley Hitler Smith is in this season and wants to get Ethan around off the ground.
I like how there's a bit of a cautionary tale. Don't throw everything into this big thing that might not work. That's kind of what he did. I mean, in a way, it's on BoJack for the whole show that he was trying to make fell apart, but it's also on him for closing down his hardware business and moving to California just to make it.
And trusting BoJack, to be honest, he's got a track record at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the second time that he let him down in a few episodes, so he should have seen it coming in a while. I really feel sorry for Brad. I really want Ethan around to be a big success. Actually, do we know whether it was or not? Because
they never got to make it because BoJack bailed on them, I think. No, but it never comes up again, so I assume.
What BoJack's trying to tell him is that, you don't need me to make this, because, he wanted to give BoJack all the funny lines, and he said, no, you're the star of the show, you deserve all this. I loved that scene between them where, they're doing that Broadwell line. I just like that. BoJack's nurturing him and, being a positive impact, and, knowing what we know about Sarah's death and the circumstances behind it, and BoJack's, role in perhaps exacerbating it or making it a lot more likely. It does make it harder when he meets that little girl who's filming Ethan around, and then he freaks out and goes away.
I mean, he probably does know. Well, he absolutely does know that he had a significant role in screwing up Sarah Lynn.
Well, it's when that girl starts saying certain things, that's when it starts to trigger him a little bit, and he starts to have the worries about Sarah Lynn.
It triggered him a lot when she says, "Oh, I want to be famous. I want to be like you." He was just like, "No." Like, that's like the first time you really saw him freak out, and it's like, yeah.
It was hard hitting
Obviously,
him.
it's a little
It's even
raw
more
for him.
hard, through season 6
Yeah.
lenses.
Yeah, and of course, then he does that whole driving thing at the end, and we get ready for the season 4, which I like the first few episodes of season 4, but I'll save that for the next one.
Yeah.
Because season 4 is when we start to see a bit of the Beatrice thing.
Yeah. Great. We are 54 minutes in, I think. And I feel like we've barely scratched the surface of what goes on this season. I feel like this every time.
It's definitely cast.
Every single season, every single episode, we have to keep telling you there's so much to explain in BoJack that I honestly don't think a single hour is enough to convey what goes on in a single season, because everything is happening from the background. I mean, come on.
We never will cover everything.
I mean, come on. I do love the fact that even though there's a murder thing going on and BoJack might be implemented, they still stay for the Jewish chair dance, and Diane agrees that you have to stay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I gotta stay for that.
But I just like all the little things they go to, like that nativity play with the non-gendered snow person and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, are you on the committee? No. Then I don't
also, in the final episode, we finally get Todd's confirmation that he's asexual.
Yes, and I like how it was built into the whole season. You know, you sort of know already by the time he says it, but...
also, the Sopranos joke. Can I please tell me I'm not the only one who got the
I
Sopranos
love that
joke?
Oh, I love that.
He got the ending.
Only copy. He works on The Sopranos. He's an editor. That's even worse. He must be so desensitized to violence and nihilistic ruminations on the banality of evil. Yeah. So, we're approaching the end of the runtime. I don't normally like to go longer than an hour. Does anyone have any final thoughts on season 3 overall?
Season 3 definitely feels the darkest that we've gotten so far. The Sarah Lynn thing definitely tips the scales to complete dark territory. So there's definitely the uncomfortable episode.
I think one of the reasons Sarah Lynn's death hits so hard when it happens, and we've touched on this earlier in the episode, is the first time we see Sarah Lynn, she stabs herself. She's always high off her ass, and you know, the time before the bender that we see her, she's applying toenail polish while driving and on the phone. So, you know, we're so acclimatized.
The whole reason she even got clean in the first place. The whole reason she even got clean in the first place is a thing addicts will do, where they'll sober up for a bit. So when they start using it again, it hits them like it did the first time they used it. It's
I mentioned that.
Decreasing tolerance.
And also,
also
on the
I mean, BoJack.
On that note, BoJack says at the funeral, everyone's like, this was bound to happen, but it wasn't bound to happen. Of course, now that takes on a new meaning. But the reason it wasn't bound to happen is BoJack was the reason her sobriety ended. Even though she never intended to keep it, she might have decided to. Like, every day could have been the day that she decided not to start using again.
Yeah, him calling was just the thing that sort of removed the option for her.
And I'm not saying she would have, but we will never know.
No. Exactly, and that's what makes it so tragic. It's not inevitable, because if you just say it's inevitable, that lets, you know, all the people who have damaged her over the years off
and
too
there are
easily,
a lot of people that have a lot to answer for there.
Oh yeah, like, you know, obviously the parents played a part. BoJack maybe less maliciously played a part, but, you know, he did enough damage to sort of have a huge role to play when it comes to responsibility. Cause
it really hits hard when you see him go to see her in the flashback, and then when she realises he only came to a show to ask her to be on his show,
Oh,
Yeah.
that was heartbreaking.
Because
It
she even
was.
says, "Thank God I have one friend that
Especially
isn't
when you
just trying to
consider
get something out of me."
But when it really comes down to it as well, when you think about it, BoJack was really the only, apart from maybe Herb until he went, he was the only real male, role model she had.
Yeah.
She really didn't have anywhere to go to for support because her mom obviously only really wanted her to, be a star and shit. Everyone else was superficial. I mean, even when BoJack was around, Herb even made that whole thing that he knew full well that everyone else would abandon him, and BoJack was probably his only real friend there.
Yeah, I think
And in a way, it obviously Sarah didn't have the other co-stars to go to clearly because she really doesn't seem to have a good relationship with either of them.
Yeah, they never seemed particularly close in the scenes where they were together. They just sort of
I mean, she's very quick to start fights with all of them, so she's clearly not close with any of them. And BoJack was really the only other adult she knew, apart from maybe Herb and a few executives. And BoJack wasn't exactly the best, role model for her. But again, it was either that or her stepdad, and the implications of her stepdad are kind of there. So really, when BoJack is your only positive male role model, it does make you feel a little bad.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
But I'd say that season 3 is the darkest one.
I think they
so
get
far
progressively darker.
So far, yeah. I think that latest, yeah.
That's why I said so far, Ollie.
Yeah.
I mean, season one's whole thing was dark with the whole flashback thing. That was a little dark for him. And season 2 had that whole guy hanging himself in, while trying to get
Corduroy
off.
Jackson.
Yeah.
But Sarah Lynn's death. Sarah Lynn's death was a lot more impactful. In fact, up until this point, the only thing that felt more tragic than this, to me, up until this point, was the whole situation with Herb. Because I've mentioned before, the meeting Herb again when he's got cancer is still a scene that gets me quite bad.
Yeah,
for reasons I've already explained, because I suck with communications in general, but the difference between me and BoJack is that BoJack never even made an attempt to keep in contact with Herb after I tried really hard to keep in contact with people I've left behind.
I mean, Herb says it himself, it wasn't about the show and it wasn't sort of about the betrayal, it was the events afterwards and the fact
granted, Herb does seem still bitter. I mean, if you see his flashback.
Can you blame him?
Not at all.
No,
I mean,
But the thing is, the bitterness probably could have been worked through if BoJack kept an open dialogue with him afterwards.
If BoJack had been like, "I'm sorry, I was terrified he was going to fire me," and then the thing is just like, there's no show without BoJack. He absolutely could have called the execs bluff.
Oh, yeah, they've already.
And I think that's something he still feels bad about, and I think that's why he could never face up to Herb, because he realized.
Yeah, they did.
But it was always fairly obvious.
Basically, that entire thing was meant to be a play off the Ellen DeGeneres situation from like the 90s, I think.
Really?
I think it was because she came. I think it was that she came out as. I can't remember if she came out as.
She came out as the lesbian and the episode was just. They asked what was his name, what's the name of the man he had a crush on, and she said Susan. And this was a huge shitstorm. Like, she was off television for a very long time. I mean, like, Ellen DeGeneres is not the nicest person in the world, but that doing that still took guts. It
was a big deal back then, and that's kind of what the Herb situation was meant
also,
to be.
it's later established that the executive that fired Herb for it was also a lesbian, so.
Yeah.
Yep. So she was a dirty cow and hypocrite as well. Love that.
I like that character though, and I think we'll discuss this more when season 6 happens. When I say I like that character, I just like how hateable that character is.
Or I hate the fact that she wastes coffee.
Oh yeah, that's forgive him.
No one who wastes coffee deserves any kind of sympathy from me.
I agree, Sam. Yeah.
Coffee was literally what got me through college.
And we've hit the hour mark, so any final remarks before we call it a podcast for this? However long it takes for us to get together for the next one.
I mean, it's probably the most...
I just think,
yeah.
still a masterpiece.
Yeah. BoJack really does go from strength to strength, and we're going to keep examining that as we go on in the weeks to come.
I think season 3...
I cannot wait for the next one. I cannot wait for the next one only because of 2 words. Ski race.
Oh, yes.
Mr.
I love that.
Peanut Butter goes completely Fruit Loops in the next season, and I love it because
the peanut butter in that season.
Look, the only spoiler I'll be willing to give on my thoughts is I love the fact that this time Mr. Peanut Butter is doing Mr. Peanut Butter things, but this time Diane does not have BoJack to kind of cushion the blow for her, and she's forced to take the full, for lack of a better term, Mr. Peanut Butter smell spread all over her. Also, my favourite quote from this season is the whole thing when Jill Pill is mentioning the whole him being naked bathed in milk as a symbolism for rebirth. I'm still trying to get over the first book.
That's one of my favourite quotes.
I don't want to be rebirthed. I'm still recovering from being birthed the first time.
We're all recovering from our first birth.
Do you know what the real tragedy is? But it's 3 hours long with no intermissions.
Yeah. So, I think is that everything?
I think, well, it's nowhere near everything, but it's enough to be going on today.
It's enough.
We could be talking about this show forever, and we still wouldn't cover even the surface. It's an iceberg show. About 30% of it's on the surface, and the other.
Well, like we said last time, Seb, we could easily do an hour-long podcast about each and every episode, but I would like to finish a project I start at some point.
I'd like to discuss this show while I'm still young.
Over this. You will never finish a project on time. We'll still be in the old folks' home, and I'll still be slitting the drip tube that's putting your medication in.
Well, if that's everything, everyone, where can the internet find you?
You can find me on Murasaki's Pit on YouTube, where I will be continuing my Resident Evil 3 playthrough. I'll probably be doing Persona 5 Royal or even Final Fantasy 7 if anyone's up for it at some point.
Yeah, who's going to plug themselves next?
Yeah.
Okay, I have a YouTube channel that I rarely update. You can find a lot of my old videos on there. I did lyrics videos, old streams of games, all sorts. I stream some games on Twitch quite often. I do truck streams, usually where we just listen to music, listen to radio, and drive about Europe, and I crash into things and unaccountably still get hired to transport across.
I keep forgetting that you're actually driving, because last time I was on there, you were driving, and then I was telling you about the horrible things that are said to me on Twitter. While we were laughing.
Let's face it, you have no filter. Even if you knew that you were going out publicly to millions of people, you'd still talk about any old rubbish you want to.
We're trucking. What else are you going to do? Simulate picking up a hiker or watching the Rowan Atkinson song, I Like Trucking?
This show is just driving around casually, listening to radio and shooting the shit with the guys, isn't it?
Okay, I'm going to have to go because it sounds like Cole's woken up and is making my wife's life a bit of a misery. So
anyway, Lindsay, do you have anything to plug?
I'm on Twitter at LindsayPB. It's Lindsay with an A. But other than that, nope, I'm good.
Okay.
Thanks for having me on.
And hopefully we'll have you on many more times yet.
Where can we find you, Ollie?
We can hope.
On
this channel, and also at twitch.tv/Ollie Johnson.
Yeah, well, that's why I asked the question, because you're not just on this
I also have a Patreon, but I don't feel I'm entitled to plug it yet. Okay, well, that's season 3. That's a wrap on Bilgecast Horseman season 3, episode 3. And we'll see you next time.
Alright, see you next